Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you. Peace out to the rest of you. I recorded what you're about to hear before I got a notification. And before I even knew when I would and would not record. So I should have started with the peace greeting. But the other recording will be without it. About the other topic, which is about bullying. But about this one, I should have started with the peace greeting. And also, I recorded this about an hour and a half before an hour and 20 minutes before I got a notification that the man whom I'm thanking sent me something on CashApp again. So I recorded about him, long story short, and before I even edited this for upload, afterwards, I was cleaning the restroom, getting ready for work, and then I got the notification that he sent something again. So what a coincidence. I hope this helps. Pay close attention. I'm sorry for how long this was, and may it be worth it. Thank you so much. And thank you again, S Jacques. It ain't even appropriate for me to start this off with the peace greeting. I'm finna let some folk have it because I'm that ninja. It's Ramadan, and fasting started a short time ago for me. The Adhan was recently called, but you know, I'm gonna tell y'all straight, man. And don't worry if some of you are like, wait a minute, when is he gonna pray? No matter how long this winds up being, if it goes longer than the time between now and when I'm supposed to pray, it means I paused it and then continued afterwards, because I can pause the recording, do something, and then come back. Shout out to Rome, also known as Average Man Unplugged. Shout out to Chantel Simone and Kendra D, the Crimson Cure, for this particular thing I'm about to say. And shout out to S Jacques, more importantly, because S Jacques sends links that explain what's going on internationally. He explains these things to me. And even though I don't get to cover that a whole lot, he does send them. And he's also very supportive. When he gets paid, I get paid. And I really do appreciate that. Shout out to Ryan G, because Ryan G is very interactive on the Buy Me a Coffee account, the platform, the Jet Black Air Lounge. I would encourage other subscribers to be interactive to make it worth your while. Because if you're there and then you ask me to cover something, well, you've paid and you guys pay not as much as S Jacques per person, I mean, but you do pay. And if you were to go there and send stories, then I would be able to cover them. But I'm going to give a summary of what I've learned from S Jacques. And he's backed up everything that he sent to me. Number one, another African nation has met with Putin and then decided, listen, this is what's going on. ECOWAS, y'all can fit the guck out. ECOWAS is the economy of the West African states, or an economic bloc of the West African states. And they've pretty much been suspected of just being agents of the West. Ibrahim Traore, the president of Burkina Faso, has stated as much before. But he's willing to give them some chances to flip on their Western influencers, if you will. The other thing I've learned from S Jacques is that while we're sitting up here delineating ourselves, which is not wrong in and of itself, by itself, but also not policing each other well enough when some of us go and call everybody else a tether. Ibrahim Traore, who's not a tether, he's not a pretender at all, has told even told Trump, you better not harm African Americans. Now, some of us have looked up and said, wait a minute, Trump is not he's going after everybody except for Black Americans. And as a matter of fact, the only poor people that he's willing to at least leave be are Black Americans, FBA. So a lot of us are saying, okay, we're going to lay off Trump because he ain't messing with us. And that's fair. Someone doesn't bother you, you leave them be. Now, I do think that you still watch how they treat other people, even though we don't believe in standing up for anybody else right now. That's understandable, too, given what we've been through. But you still look at how someone treats other people and what their reasons are before you sit up and say you would absolutely trust them. However, I've noticed this. Now, Trump likes rich people more than he likes white people. I understand that. Trump does believe in a sort of separate but equal doctrine. I mean, he literally believes that we should be distinct but equal. I don't think he really wants to see us given worse opportunities than his own people anymore. But he doesn't care about poor whites. Now, that don't bother me either because I've looked at their situation many a times. And while I don't think that it's okay that they're mistreated by their own, I also understand that when they are mistreated, they're going to be the ones that really just take it out on us. So when their stepdad comes home drunk and beats up their mom and beats up on them too, maybe they can bond with the stepdad by lynching one of us. So I look at them that way and I think, well, if Trump does betray you, I don't feel a guck. I mean, even if he owes you and he betrays you, I'm not going to step in and say, hey, they looked out for you, Trump. Look out for them too. I'm going to stand back and say no, because you know what? If we stood up for you, you would do the same to us. But I do suspect that Ibrahim Traore's saying this has something to do with why Trump has at least consciously left us alone. I mean, he's not just distracted from us. He's consciously made a decision. I'm just not going to step on them right now. I suspect that it's because Trump's never really had a racial hatred, and that his hatred has always been class-based. I suspect that it's largely that he's about as biased as the least biased white person in the West could possibly be, racially speaking, but class bias is strong in this guy. I suspect that. I've suspected it for a while, but he knows that his most support comes from the so-called grassroots of white folks that want to be billionaires like him and think he's going to open that door to them and remove what's stopping them from becoming the white billionaires that even they see on TV and know that they're not. Now, this is what I suspect, but I also suspect that Ibrahim Traore has sort of reminded Trump, listen, they've been through enough. They were taken away from us. Don't take upon yourself the legacy of further disenfranchising them. And Ibrahim Traore also wants black folks to become citizens. He wants diasporans to have the option to become citizens of Burkina Faso at the same time that his landlocked African nation, doesn't even have a port, is up and coming and shaking things up. At the same time this is happening. Now, I do subscribe to the mindset that any ruler that calls themselves Muslim must rule by the Sharia. I do subscribe to that. That's how you do it. So I am merely giving credit where it is due, because at the very least, Ibrahim Traore is not bowing to the same masters as before. Now, why am I mentioning this, despite the title that you can see on here? Well, I'm saying that because I want S Jacques to get all the credit that he deserves. And I don't want anybody in here calling him or anybody else a tether that rocks with us and does not pretend to be FBA when they're doing something wrong, and then turn around and give every other black nationality credit for everything they've done right. This is not who this man is. I want us to remember when we start talking about the tethers, and remember, tether was supposed to mean those who pretend to be FBA when they do wrong, and then turn around and give credit to every other nationality of Black folks when they do something right. Well, I got my strong work ethic from my parents who were from the islands, or from my parents who were from Nigeria, and when they're getting credit or when they're on the stage, and they're the class valedictorian, and then when their sibling turns around and does some criminal shuck fit, starts trying to act like they from Detroit, destroy at Michigan. I'm from Baltimore, not me. Stuff like that. Okay, those are supposed to be the tethers. When people don't lie about stuff and they rocking with us, that's not a tether. And I want us to remember that. And one of the reasons why it is that I will go ham on a scammer, whether they're from Nigeria or anywhere else for that matter. Well, I will go ham on a scammer. And I will go ham on a tribalist. And then turn around and say, we're not going to sit up here and bash someone because of their nationality when they're Black, and we still have a common enemy. We got reasons to cooperate to a common defense. We ain't going to all love each other. But we have a common goal of a common defense because we got enemies on the basis of our DNA. Really on the basis of their hatred for our DNA. And the assumption that they're natural and they're a standard. That's why I do that. I have seen and I've listened to them for a while, and I've watched them go through discrimination as well. I've seen this happen. I've seen it happen in Atlanta. Seen where they get discriminated against by the same system that discriminated against us. Why do you think that you got a bunch of engineers and accountants from non-Saharan African nations that live in the United States? Their parents had jobs, but they can't get them anymore back home despite their education. They go to the U.S. and the only jobs they can get in the United States are menial jobs. What do you think that is? That's discrimination. What do you think it was when Trump said, listen, the U.S. has a visa waiver program, but that's going to be for European and a few Asian nations, and every single African and Latin American nation is going to be left out of that. And maybe Chile. Chile used to have, I believe that there were... I believe Chile, the Bahamas, and the Emirates were three nations, along with Canada, three nations from which you could enter the U.S. on a passport, and you will be allowed to stay a certain number of days. Just don't try to work, and don't stay beyond that, and you good. And don't violate any other laws, and you Gucci. I guess Chile's off of that. Chile, white behind Chile, is off of that list, I guess. Some of you could tell me. What do you think that is? Don't get it twisted. He is going to lead the whitening of America. And really, white folks are really just in a debate about what to do. I mean, the Democrats are like, we'll bring in all the people of color and they'll form a buffer zone between us and the N-words. And, the right wing is like, listen, we would do that if we have to, but I don't think we have to. We can still turn and go back to the old model of having the poor whites be the buffer. We could do that. I mean, we have to deliver on promises soon enough because, the poor whites are going to wake up. They've already had conversations about their poverty with other people of color, especially Black folks who have risen up out of the levels of poverty to where 62% of Black men are in the middle class are already telling them, listen, you're a poor white, the right wing don't care about you, and the left wing will easily forget about you. So if we don't go ahead and remove this non-American buffer zone, as they would call it, because to me, the only real Americans are the original Americans and African Americans. To me, those are the only Americans. Yeah, I said it. We were forced to be American, and the original Americans got there first. So ain't nobody more American than them. But the way they see it, you know what they mean when they say American. So what they're pretty much saying is, we don't need a non-American buffer class. Now, we'd rather not have that. At the very least, these are our Negroes over here. Let's further tame and domesticate them and placate them. And this is what I'm picking up on because I understand how these folks think. I don't understand everything about it, but I understand it better than many of our people. Not because I'm just smarter, but because, simply put, they drop their guard. And so there are many of us, because as I stated before, nuance is kryptonite to the Negro. So there are many of us who start acting like we've always had nothing but grudges for every other nationality of black people, and there's never been any cooperation. And that's not true. Marcus Garvey had a base of support amongst African Americans. That is very true. He had more of a base of support amongst African Americans than he did in Jamaica, where he was born and raised. Marcus Garvey never got to make it to the continent, but he was trying to go back. He had support amongst African Americans for returning to Africa. You know who sold him out? One, Liberian diplomatic officials sold him out. Now, they didn't know exactly what the U.S. was going to do, but they disclosed some of his plans. Not only that, but since Garvey was not able to realize that dream of repatriation, his former foe, W.E.B. Du Bois, he pronounced it Du Bois. He stated this in a telegram to some other people. W.B. Du Bois, actually stated later on, you know what, this dream of integration is not going to work. And he went to Ghana and died there. The Haitian Revolution was, in fact, known to be an inspiration for other revolutions, slave revolts in the Americas in general after it was completed. Now, it was not the first one in the Americas. Don't get it twisted. It was the first one that led to the formation of a black jurisdiction in the Americas. That was true. But it was not the first revolt. The first slave revolt recorded in the Americas was actually in between 1519, I believe, and 1520. It started, it was called the Wolof Rebellion of Hispaniola. And it started as a cooperation between the Wolof slaves, who were Muslim, and the Taino original Americans there. And the Taino went to the cacique, or the chief of the Taino, whose name was Enriquillo, and they reached an agreement. They were going to unite forces, and they were going to fight them white folk, the Spaniards. And as a matter of fact, the Wolof were largely owned by Christopher Columbus's son, Diego Colon. It was a Muslim started and led rebellion. So see, when many of us don't know the history, we start thinking that, we have a history that we don't have. Now, most Black Americans and Black people in general will sit up and admit to the importance of history, but we won't actually take the time to learn and read history and learn its details and its nuance. A lot of us are saying we need to go more into STEM. We do need to go into STEM and not run away from it. Those of us that have the ability to do it, but we don't need to sit up here and say, well, history is a liberal art, so we don't need it. No, Ninja, you need it. You absolutely need it. We need this. This history, I don't know, but I'm still learning it. And I used to teach history. It's exhaustive. It doesn't run out. And it's the same thing that's happening with many of you. More and more of you are saying, listen, we need to go into maths and sciences. You do need to. You have to understand, though, that machines can do many of the maths and sciences. But when it comes down to history and interpreting its impact on today, well, that's a purely human endeavor. We need people that can do that. Our people are sitting up and following the paths of other groups of people, thinking because, they're more successful than Black Americans are. And we're going to make a mistake their butts are making. See, we at least know the importance of knowing who we were before white folk came along and told us who we were. At least we know that importance. You got other groups of people who have more access to more knowledge about who they were before white folk came along. And yet and still, they don't read the history that's available to them. They themselves think that much of their history started with colonization, or that their history accelerated after colonization. They themselves think so. You think Indians know everything about who they were before white folk came along? They have access. They have some pictures in their head of what it must have been like, but they don't have they have access, but they don't have a full knowledge of it because they don't read history. If you don't put it in a basic elementary school history book, make it a part of the popular culture, maybe make 1 or 2 movies about it, they don't know because they don't read this stuff either. They read, they learn, but it's only STEM. They're imbalanced with this. Same with the Japanese. They're imbalanced. Many Japanese don't know how the samurai used to behave. They were rife with corruption. We walk around using the term samurai and Bushido as if the samurai just typically followed Bushido, which did exist, which was a code. No, we don't really know how many of them did. We know that they were rife with corruption. They killed and got away. They committed murders and got away with it. We assume that the ninja were all a bunch of sneaky, treacherous mercenaries that just did in whoever they were paid to do in. Kind of, but you know what? There were a lot of times when it wasn't just you paid and they knocked somebody off. There were times when they did it for pay because somebody deserved to be knocked off. It went back and forth. This is a nuanced thing. And we tend to be fed up and impatient with nuance. Now, I do get impatient with the abuse of nuance. I'm right to, and so are you. But you tend to be impatient with the existence of nuance because of the abuse of it. Stop it. These are things I kind of knew before, but you know what? I never forget these things, and that is largely due to the efforts of people like S Jacques. He's not the only one, but he's one of them. He's the main one. This is why it is that we need to, in fact, delineate, but we delineate as part of a race. We don't delineate and say we're going to fight the rest of our race. We don't even delineate and say that we're not related to the rest of our race. That is counterproductive as well. It's actually dangerous. How much do you think we can get away with something like that? How much do you think we can afford that? Are we going to sit up here and just act like any kind of cooperation with anybody else is going to undermine us? Eventually, what'll wind up happening, remember that when a fire runs out of fuel, the fire then consumes itself. What happens when we take some of this division too far? We already are divided people. We have been. We've also been quite united in many ways, but we've been a divided people. Attorney Dennis Sperling has talked about the divisions that we used to have and probably still do. Some of them he said that we need, and we do need division when it comes down to class behavior or behavioral classes. Do we need it when it comes down to purely financial or socioeconomic classes? I'm not so sure that we need that. We certainly do not need that when it comes down to dealing with other groups of people. We can't afford it then. But do we need it when it comes down to behavioral classes? Absolutely. And one of the first things we're going to need to divide, or one of the first divisions that we're going to need, both internally and externally, is going to be behavioral. Does this particular Negro here have a balanced understanding? No, he doesn't. He flies off the deep end all the time. Everything's always binary with him, even when it's not. Okay. Never mind. Now, I'm not talking about gender. That's binary. A few exceptions of defects or disorders of birth are the only exceptions that there biologically are. It's binary. It starts off like that. And that's okay. We're talking about when they insist on assigning binary values to things that are not binary. All black people united or all black people divided? Well, obviously we're divided on many things. Obviously we are. Okay. Then you start asking other deeper questions. Well, are we American or are we African? Oh my God. What, you can't be both? We never had a choice but to be both. FBA were forced to be both. And many of you are beginning to say, I ain't no African. Um, who do you think benefits when you say that? What, you gonna give up something because of what white folk did to us? And you're gonna give up what they want you to give up? Don't forget, when resources get scarce again, they're gonna tell us go back to Africa. You don't go back because they tell you to. You go back when they don't want you to go back, but they're going to say that because resources are scarce. You got to keep in mind and understand that this is not, you cannot sit up here and act like, hey, look, it's all, it's one or the other. No, everything ain't one or the other. There are times when many things are going to be both. You don't let people come along and give you artificially tough choices to make. You don't come along and let people give you two things that are not mutually exclusive and then act like they're mutually exclusive. This is something that we tend to fall victim to as Black folks because we've been given religion packaged as if suffering is the purpose. Now, in Islam, worship is the purpose for us being here. Suffering happens and then it stops, and then it happens again and then it stops. There's also joy in between. So hardship is a test. Ease is also a test. There are easy tests and there are hard tests. So there's a balance for us. But we Black folks tend to forget, even when Islam is presented to us, the truth, if you ask me, the solution, it's still packaged to us incorrectly. We ourselves come out of the church and into the mosque believing that our purpose is to suffer. No, the purpose is to worship. But since we Black folks have been duped into believing that whatever it is that we're on, the purpose is to suffer, then when anytime somebody presents some suffering to us, we sit up and just say, oh God, we have to do this now, instead of thinking, wait a minute, do we really have to suffer this? If it's needless suffering, then the only suffering we need to go through is the suffering of resisting to make sure we don't have to suffer that no more. And this is exactly what the red pill aware Black men are doing correctly. They're looking at women as attractive Black women that are young and fit and feminine. And milfophiles like me are looking at attractive Black women that are older and fit and feminine. And we're saying, you're not going to sit up here and start taking something off of the table just because you look good or just because you're not fat. You're not going to start taking these things off the table. You can hang that mess up. No, be worried. You look good and you're going to behave exactly the way that you would want us to behave. Even if we were 6 feet tall and millionaires, the way you want us to behave or the way you say you do, because you don't know how to handle it when a 6 foot tall millionaire behaves the way you want them to. You still, but the way you say, no, you're going to behave that way with us, even when you're a beauty queen, even when you got a flat stomach, big old breasts, and a big old booty and a cute face. No, you're going to behave the way you saw that big chick with the big old gut and no breasts and a flat booty act. The way she behaved trying to get a man, that's the way you're going to behave when you look like you do, or we're done with you, because there are other women that will behave this way. And even if they say, well, those women only behave this way because the countries that they live in ain't no good, that's when we can look and say, well, they're not the West, but they seem happy with it. They can actually be happy with where they are and where they live and how life is that way once they've adjusted to it, and still look like you, but behave far better. You're still deficient. You're still making an artificially tough choice for us to make. You are presenting an artificial fake dichotomy. You're taking two things that aren't mutually exclusive and pretending like they are, to give us a skewed sense of reality about you and what it's like to be you and what you can't do, so that we won't expect from you what you can. While you will sit up and demand from us what we actually cannot do. Like turn 15 cents into a dollar magically. Flip money. Flip money. Look, in order for money to be money, it cannot be as easy as a 2-word sentence. Kevin Hart told a joke about this once, talking about how people talk and you don't know what just happened because of the way that they are very vague in their speech, especially street dudes. And he said, so he used an example. So I took this money that I had 1,500, and then I flipped it. And Kevin said, no, we're not just going to skip past that. What did you do to flip 1,500 into 3,000? I mean, if I have 1,500, it's only 1,500. How did you flip that? What do you mean? What, did you take them and run every bill through a copy machine or something? And that's a legitimate question to ask. And I want to know sometimes, hey, whoa, how did you flip that? What are we doing here? Well, you know, that's why we call them street dudes. They can't talk about that. Okay, they really can't. Not in state free. But you, the black manosphere, you black red pillar wear men, you are rightly turning around and you were saying to black women, Western black women, and increasingly so, black women from the continent, as more and more of these major cities begin to fall to misandry. You're saying to them, what you will not do is sit up here and decide that because of your good looks, you're going to act bad. We will ditch all of you. Look, let me tell you something, gentlemen. I'm going to tell you this on a Rizal. If you want, and here's a money-making idea for those of you that do decide to go to the continent. You run matchmaking services where you will match men in the continent of Africa with women from Southeast Asia. Now, the men from Southeast Asia are not going to they're not going to come in large numbers trying to match or come and join your sites or your services trying to match with women from Africa. That's not going to happen. Would the women from there be willing to match with the men of Southeast Asia? Maybe they would. I don't know. They probably would come to you and say, well, could you match me with a white man, a European? They probably would do that because, you know, sisters tend to skip over other non-whites and go straight to the white man. That's one of the things when you notice I've said this before, when a sister divests, she doesn't go for the Southeast. She doesn't go for another man of color that's not traditionally our enemy or collectively our enemy. No. She goes for specifically who doesn't like us. I noticed that. We're not the same. Now, I didn't just go off on a tangent. Bear with me. I'm going to land this jet black aircraft, inshallah. You gentlemen have to understand that if you wanted, let's say you wanted to make some dough, but you don't want to live in the villages in order to find the right woman. And you're afraid now that if you find a lady from the village and you move her to the big city, that she's going to become misandrous because of the influence that you previously had to just not take her to the United States in order to avoid, and not take her to the West in order to avoid. You're like, oh man, I don't think I want to. Hell, I mean, I like living in Kampala, but I better not take this village girl to Kampala now. Forget not take her to the West. I better not take her to Kampala. Dang, that's what you do. And Malaysia's got a problem. At least Kuala Lumpur does. You take that village woman in Malaysia to Kuala Lumpur. They're gonna face this dichotomy. So maybe you'll say, no, I ain't finna do that. So this is what you do. Start a matchmaking service. Now, I don't know how much it'll make, but you could have it as a side business. Now you got this matchmaking service, and especially those of you that are into coding, you could do this, or you could hire another brother that is. And this is what happens. These men understand that if these women in these big cities want to act a further muck and fool, they can go to the village if they want. But if they don't even want to risk that, they can then turn around and bring someone from Southeast Asia. Now, he qualifies to have a visa to enter her country. She qualifies for a visa to enter his country once they're married. And that's if they want to do the legal marriage. You do that. Dude, know this. Not every woman in Southeast Asia wants a brother. Not all of them. brothers from the continent or us. Not all of them do, but a lot of them will sit up and say, you know what, I'm gonna get him a chance. Now they may say, well, you know, I could marry one that's already over here. That's what I'm looking for. You could, or you could marry one that's over here and he's already comfortable. It depends on what you want, ma'am. But the point is, if this is presented as an option, then these brothers they're gonna understand. I ain't got to sit up here and deal with just this misandry that's going on. At the very least, the idea of such sites, matchmaking sites and services for them to go to, is going to explain to these women that if they follow this Western misandry, this anti-black misandry of the Western sister, they gonna lose the men that are right there. And most of them ain't gonna find no non-black man at all, period. And that's the end of that. Yeah, the reason I mentioned that was because I was going somewhere with this when I got off on that as a side note. I'm mentioning this because what you guys are doing is you were rightfully saying, you and the Black Manosphere, you're rightfully saying, no more false dichotomies and falsely non-mutually exclusive options presented like they're mutually exclusive. Not even in terms of our Black meme culture. Put up a bunch of famous singers that are passed away and you're like, you got a 19-hour drive or you got a 19-hour flight. Which one you gonna listen to? Even if you put a photo and you're like, one of them's got to go. Even if the options are 3 out of 4, only one's got to go. Even that. I know you're thinking that's just memes. Come on now, Jet Black. It ain't that big a deal. It's not that big a deal if you're analytically thinking when you see it and you realize this is just an entertainment question. You're not realizing, but you remember that. A lot of us tend to forget. If you go through too many memes like this, and we do generate too many memes like that, then you reinforce in our minds that our purpose is to just always have tough choices to make, and that's it. No, the purpose is to worship. That's the purpose. Tough choices in life are not the purpose. There are enough mutually exclusive things in life that are presented, and you got to choose between one, or you got to choose between three. That's true. Or you got to choose between three and you can get any two out of them. This does happen, but that's not the purpose of life. We generally tend to think as Black people, no matter what our nationality is, which is why I'm talking about this, that you can't have multiple good things in life. Nobody gets to have every good thing in life on this side of the grave. But we tend to readily believe that 2 or 3 good things in life can't come in any combinations. Those of us that are Hebrew Israelite, those of us that are Christians and in the church, those of us that are Muslims, tend to readily believe this sort of thing. I have made that mistake and I'm going to make it again before I die, I'm pretty sure, even if I only have a week left to live. However much time God has given me, or however little time God has given me. And whether I live or die, I ask him to forgive my sins. Actually, I ask him to pardon my sins. To make me forget them, make the earth forget them, make all the witnesses forget and not even question me about them. I ask him for that. Not that I deserve it, but I need his mercy. But no matter how little time he has given me, even if it's an hour, I'm going to make that mistake again because I'm trained. We are trained. And it doesn't matter if you're Haitian, Dominican. Even if you're a Dominican that says, I know Black, you're going to make that mistake because you're conditioned to do it. Poor whites tend to make that mistake, so you know how people are going to make it. You could be Ghanaian or Guyanese, Zambian or Zimbabwean, Namibian. You could be that. You could be Angolan or Mozambican, Tanzanian or Kenyan, Ugandan or Rwandan, Mauritanian or Mauritian. You could be from Sao Tome and Principe, or you could be from Cabo Verde or the Seychelles. It don't make a furthermucking bit of difference. No, I didn't cuss just now. It's Ramadan. I need to work on that anyway, actually. But I mean, the point I'm making is it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're not even from the continent within the last 50,000 years. If you were from Melanesia and you're black, and that's what Melanesia means, dark islands. If you are from Melanesian islands like Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Papua New Guinea, Bougainville, which is a disputed territory, no matter where the cuss word you are from, if you are black, you have been trained to think that every time something good happens, it's something else good that cannot come with it. And you have been trained to falsely assign mutual exclusivity in your mind, to falsely assume mutual exclusivity in your mind between two or three good things in life that do not preclude each other, that can in fact come together. You've been trained to assume that they just can't. So how are we going to sit up here after we've been given this sort of mind screw, or we've been fine mucked like this? That's another spoonerism. You know what I mean? Had our brains played with and tampered with, had our psychology screwed up by you know who. If we have all been through this, then delineation is okay if you understand that you are delineating within a race. You are simply saying, we do have a history, we do have a culture, we didn't have a choice but to have one, just like you've been forced to have one. Then that is normal, that is okay. But when you take that delineation and go as far as a division, guess what? You're going to find out how much bad stuff we got in common. And then you got to ask yourself, well, who the hell did that? And then you wind up coming right back to you wind up coming full circle to what we knew already when Garvey started preaching in London, got in touch with Booker T. Washington through letters, and then went to North America. Didn't get a chance to meet Booker T. Washington because Booker T. Washington passed during his passage, passed away while Garvey was on the way on the ship, but then he got support from Black Americans. And there are a whole bunch of things that we don't even realize about that. See, Garvey was in the North, and that's where his organization was. It was headquartered. I mean, he was in New York. It makes sense. We had a large Black American and Caribbean community up there. You always had that. And many FBAs have some Caribbean ancestors, Dennis Sperling included, and many people in the Caribbean have some African-American ancestors. You had FBA that fought for the crown because the British said, we're going to do away with slavery. And the white Americans that were fighting against the British were like, we're not. Or we'll say that we are, but you know what it is. And you had a lot of FBA at that time who said we can trust the Brits at least to keep that part of their word. And they fought. And when the Brits said, okay, listen, you 13 colonies, you got it. We're done. You go on ahead. But we're going to take the Black soldiers that we did have, the ones that fought for us, they stand with us. We're not sending them back. At least the Brits did do that. Some went to Canada. So when you see a Black Canadian, what you going to say? You ain't FBA? That's exactly where their roots might come from. Many of them are a combination of Caribbean and FBA. Foundational Black Americans that went and became Canadians, and then more recent migrants from the Caribbean. It's a combination. It's not as simple as I'm 100%. Nobody's 100% of anything. Genetically or culturally, it doesn't matter. Linguistically, you as an individual can be. Culturally, you as an individual can be. But you can't sit up and say that nobody in your family history came from this language group or this particular culture. Even within the Black race, it's not like that because we've always been lumped together, always. And within Africa, you've had a lot of intermarriage, even regionally. Many East Africans have West African DNA. Many Somalis have Bantu DNA. I mean, the non-Bantu Somalis, they don't know this until they take the test. Then they find out, oh my God, I have some Yemeni or Arabian Peninsula DNA, and most of that is from fathers and not moms. But I got West African or what you call Bantu DNA too. They don't know this till they take the test. You'll have West Africans got some East African ancestry. Yeah, that happens. You got Northern Nigerians that have Peninsula or Arab ancestry if they take the DNA test. You start getting into just unnecessary division, and you're going to wind up you're going to come right back full circle to, okay, there's white supremacy. It's them against all of us. You're going to come right back to we got this common enemy. We're going to need to cooperate if we're going to defend ourselves from this common enemy. That's what needs to happen. And that's why I say delineate in terms of historical accuracy. That is normal. That is fine. Jamaica had to have its history distinct from the other islands. Each island had to have a distinct history, even if they were colonized by the same white folk. They had to. It's not their fault. Knowing it as a historical fact is to be done. You need to do that. But why the walk actually would you turn around and then start acting like it's us versus them when it's not? Now, when it is, that's fine. But that's the one that wants to fight with you. It's not us versus them when you're talking about somebody that's not looking to fight with you. Why would you do that? What kind of foolishness are you on? You got Jamaicans that land in the States and they're like, look, I can't hide the fact that I'm Jamaican. I can't be a tether. I can't deceive anybody. Fluent in English, but that doesn't mean that I can speak it with a regional accent with which I didn't grow up. What you gonna do? Tell Chantel Simone she's a tether because she lives in the States and she's black? But she's not from the United States. Is that what you're going to do next? It's not going to work. And you will come right back full circle to what it was that Garvey wound up telling Black Americans. The Black Americans began to understand and support and then began to try to export to the rest of the Black world along with Garvey until he was betrayed and deported. For which he never got to make it to Africa. But after which his foe, W.E.B. Du Bois, said, you know what, he was right. And left the U.S. and died in Ghana. And is still buried there to this day. You wind up coming to realize the same thing. I'm going to leave it with this and I'm going to close it. You're going to wind up understanding that white supremacy comes from the one that's against us. And this one makes it his goal and his mission to convince us that God doesn't care about what we Black folks have been through. Then comes back and says God cares, but it's a big laugh to him too. This is what winds up, this is what we come back to full circle every so often as we go through these delineations and this, I'm better than them, and they go through this thinking that they're better than us. And then we come back to realize that them and us were merely distinctions that we could not have afforded to allow to become divisions, and we keep on doing it. This is not the first time. This is the first time we've done this on social media. This is not the first time this has happened. And I, who used to teach history, have been reminded of this by S Jacques. A few other supporters too, but largely by S Jacques, who did this, who shared stuff with me, not even realizing what he was doing. That's why I tip my hat to him. Now, I was originally going to record about something else in this, but I decided as I'm recording that I'm going to title this appropriately to this because this is necessary, and I'm going to talk about the bullying in the next one. So, congratulations, you get 2 in a day. But I said that I was going to close out with that little rhyme that I said. Understand this, when it comes down to Ramadan, I don't scale back in militancy because I'm fasting. No. That means it's time to increase in my discipline. It does not mean that it is time to be extra careful to not offend anybody. It does mean that I need to be extra careful to not offend those who did not deserve it or offend them for things which they do not deserve. It means I need to be more careful in that. And even then, the end of Ramadan doesn't mean I step off of that. It doesn't mean that I start going backwards. It means that I'm supposed to stay where I was and continue to progress. Ramadan's supposed to be an acceleration of that progress. So, as I stated, normally I record, I fast. I'm not saying it to brag. It's a requirement for all of us. I'm not saying that I'm very good at it. I'm simply saying that when I don't record in the daytime, it may be because of that. I have to be careful not to hurt my throat while I'm fasting. But if you do hear a narration of something I've said in somebody else's voice, that's the reason. That's what that's about. But no, Ramadan does not mean I'm going to scale back and I'm going to start being extra nice even to people that are offensive. Doesn't mean that. Not at all. I'm going ham on them mother cuss words. That's why you hear me go ham on somebody that ain't FBA and talks down on FBAs, or why you just because they FBAs, or why you hear me go ham on someone that's from the continent and they start talking down on Caribbean black folk about things that ain't true. Now, if I don't know that it's not true, I'll fuck the shuck up. But if I know that what they're saying ain't true, I'll get on them. Hey, that's not true about them. Cut that mess out. Or when I hear somebody from the Caribbean start going ham on people from the continent, and I know it's not true, I'll be like, hey, that's not true. Cut that mess out. If you really believed it, then you didn't know. But now you do. I'll tell you where you can find out it's not true. But don't do that. Don't blame them for stuff they didn't do. Because we do have a common enemy. That's why we're so scattered west of the continent. Even east of the continent sometimes. I'm not going to sit up here and say, look, it's okay to be divided when you don't need to be. We need to let the divisive, with the first division that needs to happen is going to be between those of us who treat the delineation as an actual distinction without hatred and those who insist on making it a hatred and being unnecessarily divisive. Let them divide themselves from the rest of us. The Nigerians who hate non-Nigerians, hell, the ones who hate everyone that's not from their tribe. And that's just one example. The Mauritanian that hates diasporan black folks, no matter what nationality in the Americas. No, let them go ahead, lump them all together and let them stay over there. The ones who really thought we didn't have a culture, educate them. The ones who insist on saying it when it's not truth, no, let them stay over there. Kai Sanat, you've been around us. You know we got a culture. Stay your country behind where you are. You were divisive for no reason. You might as well be a white supremacist telling a lie like that. You weren't living in the continent when you came with this notion. You were living in North America with us talking about we ain't got no culture. Even those who sit up and say, well, in my culture, we prostrate our foreheads to the ground in front of the elders. That's worship. That's an act of worship. We do not, other people on the continent don't worship the elders. They respect them. There's a difference. Don't come around talking about because we don't follow exactly your culture of worshiping human beings that are just as fallible, that we don't have a culture at all. Screw you. Damn you for lying. And that's not a curse word. You want to practice an act of worship against or for human beings, even if you don't mean to worship them. You're going to practice an act of worship according to your own religious rules, and then you're going to turn around and say we have no cultural barbarians because we don't follow yours. What about your neighboring tribes that don't do stuff like that? You're going to lie and say that we're animals because we don't do this, but you're going to let your neighbors, or you're going to pretend to let your neighbors off the hook just because we're around? Damn you for that. God already got you for an act of worship for other human beings when he's the one that created you. They just conceived you. But since you're going to sit up and say we ain't got no culture, damn you for that. You that are divisive, you all can go, you all can stay over there. You want to be divisive, go ahead. We will be against you. Not just me, but the Jamaican who is distinct but not divisive, he and I are going to be shoulder to shoulder against you. The Nigerian, the Ghanaian, the Beninese, the Togolese, the Cameroonian, the Angolan, the Mozambican, the South African, the Cape Verdean, the Mauritanian, the Sudanese, the Ugandan, the Rwandan, the Bajan, the ones from Martinique, the Guyanese, Surinamese. Shout out to Joe Ibmore. The Black Brazilian, the Black Colombian, other Afro-Latinos that are not divisive, though they are distinct, are going to be at my shoulder. We're going to be against you because you were divisive and you were bad for our people. You might as well wear a Klan hood on your head and show up with a noose and a cross soaked in gasoline. You might as well be doing that. Because I just told you where this white supremacy comes from. You can sit up and say, well, there's no such thing as a Satan. Well, who would have started that then? Who had the means and the motive to start this before electronic media? And while some of us are going too far with this, we need to tip our hat to those who are distinct but not divisive, because they're actually helping out the race. Multiple nationalities. Like S Jacques. He ain't the only one doing this for anybody at all. I'm not saying that. But he's the one that's been helping me out, and he didn't even know he was doing this. So don't sit up and say, well, he paid you, so that's why that's why you saying all of this. No. Because he sends far more links than he does money. But the links, when I look at them, even though I can't cover them individually all the time, I can look at them and then I can zoom out and I can see what the bigger picture is. And this is a big help from him. No, you know what? True. Many African governments have not done enough compared to what they said they were going to do, and they haven't done enough compared to what we thought they were going to do when they didn't say it. That part is true. Misconceptions that were our fault, misconceptions that were the fault of these governments. This part is true. Yeah, that's kind of a big deal. But I also understand this, my people. When you zoom out, you begin to realize. When you now begin to see the forest along with the trees, you begin to realize why I keep talking about distinction without unnecessary division. Remember that there's hardly at all throughout the entire black world, and even throughout much of the Americas, there is hardly a border that was drawn up or that existed between purely black jurisdictions and at the agreement of these black jurisdictions. Hardly ever. Hardly any at all, if there are any. Even Ethiopia's boundaries have been affected by the colonization that never fully took root within Ethiopia except for Eritrea at that time. And Eritrea and its boundary with Ethiopia was, in fact, the first and most glaring example of that, even after the colonization was over for both of them. So this ADOS gangbanging ain't no different from Crips and Bloods fighting over hoods in which they pay rent and over streets they don't own. It's the same thing. I hope this helps. Thank you for listening. As always, black heart, black mind, black out. Black heterosexual non-select male power. Because the gynocrats don't like it. And thank you for flying with us here on Jet Black Airways, where the phrase jet black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with us till the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender justice forever.